When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome, insatiable listeners, to Season 4, Episode 6, Nicole Corcoran's Food Freedom Story. It's not about portions and calories. If you can't tell, I love me a curious skeptic. They are my people. And Nicole was no different when she first came to me. Not necessarily about me and the work, but could weight loss really be a side effect? Could I really lose weight without not trying, but not being obsessed? And so we're going to talk about that today, how she did lose weight as a side effect and in counting, yet the nuance behind that. Because I know in the anti-diet movement and body positivity, you're kind of not supposed to focus on weight loss at all. And while I don't do that in my work, I think there is a nuanced way to understand that and honor if you really do want to lose some weight and you feel like it'll improve your health, then that's okay. We can't not tell women how not to feel. So we get into the nuance of that because it's a really delicate conversation. We also talk about some key health history experiences she didn't even know to share with me. And many people don't know and don't understand that it affects their health, what they're eating, and their weight. And so we get into what those were. We talk about the one food she surprisingly needed more of and the pattern she needed less of to make food so much more intuitive and easy for her. And piggybacking on that weight loss as a side effect, we're going to talk about the two keys that enabled Nicole to stay with her transformation process. Because we're totally honest that because I don't focus on that, it took a while for the weight loss to happen. And so we talk about what gave Nicole the trust to keep going with the process. And I think you'll find her answer really inspiring. So enjoy today's episode. And if you have enjoyed Insatiable and gotten value from it, you could please leave me a review. Trying to get to 100 by the end of summer, and we're really, really close. We have a great, vibrant, active, pretty big community here, and I would love if a couple more of you could just go over there and push us over to the edge. That way more people will find this kind of conversation that's really, really out of the box and hopefully start to give more people relief. So thank you so much for those who have left a review and for tuning in. Enjoy today's episode. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole. I get so much feedback from people that they love when I bring my clients on. So thank you for coming on our season of clarifying the issue. And I couldn't think of a better client to bring on because I just can't wait for everyone to hear about like the health history realizations you had of what mattered and your total transformation and everything. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Allie. I'm so excited to be here. I know that I found you when down the rabbit hole trying to clarify my own issue. I wasn't sure what it was, but I was like, I think she might help me with the answer.
But I love that
years plus later, and I think, we're getting closer.
Yeah. Well, I love that you were skeptical too. And like, I remember when you first contacted me, you're like, I looked at other people's websites, and you said one woman you looked at, like, she was like, oh, I learned how to kickbox and that solved everything. And you're like, okay, that's not my issue. You knew that much, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if someone had like a thing or like a one stop, like this changed my life and it'll change yours too. I was like, nope, that can't be right.
Yeah. So you were already intuitively on the right track. So tell me a little bit about what you were like, why you came to me before and how you understood that, like your health challenges before we started working together.
Yeah. So I have always considered or been considered by the masses or by medical field as being like overweight, even though I had tried so many different things. I tried different diets. Like many of your clients have said, like they've been on Weight Watchers since they were 10 or something like that. And I just knew there was something more to like my issue because I'm considered successful in life and in work and what I do in my career. But why was I not successful in like living up to society's goal of like the healthy body or the picture of health? Or why was I self-sabotaging myself, even if I wasn't, with food and exercise and everything else? And why did it seem to consume everything I thought about and did, even though I wasn't making a viable difference? I was just eating up space in my mind wondering, what was I doing wrong? How could I fix it? I ate the thumb of cheese and the hand of chicken, and I was still not, like any difference. So that was really what I was out to find. And I learned so much more figuring it out over the last year with you, that like it's truly changed the way I think about everything. And I've freed up so much mind space that it's exciting to live life like to the fullest in the most non-cliche way. I'm not jumping out of airplanes or anything.
So as we started, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is because we worked together privately, we went over your health history form, and you had left, you had put the big things like I had my tonsils out, or, these kind of like the big things we think to put on our health history form. But then I think it was like month 2 or 3 when we were starting to put together how to balance hormones and heal your gut, that you were just like, oh my God, I did not tell you like the most important things now that I know that they're important. So can you speak to that for people out there who think that they're kind of adjusting their food and life and diet, or food and exercise, to their health history, but maybe what did you find that was really important to know that you thought before was insignificant in your past?
Yeah. So I remember we were talking and something came up around like, when did you first feel X? Or like, when did you realize that you started feeling this way? Or like, what was that pivotal moment for you? And I realized that it was around the age of 15, 16. And, we were discussing that time, and I was like, of course I was a teenager, it was some rough years, whatever. And then it all came and it hit me like a ton of bricks that I had actually had a really awful allergic reaction to poison ivy that summer. And because of that, I had gone to the doctors and they had given me a ridiculous amount of steroids, like prednisone, to control the allergic reaction. And they were probably warranted in doing that, but maybe not twice, or, I don't know. It was a really crazy thing. But then I started realizing all these little things play such a bigger part into a pivotal moment in your health. And sometimes, people with more serious or, systematic health issues can really see that snowball from like a pivotal moment in time. But honestly, looking back at that time, it was like a really crappy day that I acquired this poison ivy. And from there, it spiraled out into a lot of like little things that eventually add up into a bigger health journey that I was not even aware that I was on. And so I think that thinking about my tonsils and when I broke my ankle, like they were obvious. Like when you go to the doctor, they don't ask you like, when's the last time you had a cold? They don't ask that because that's not what they're making sure of. And realizing that from that point to essentially 10, 11 years later, I had realized that I was doing a lot of things on autopilot, covering up symptoms that I didn't know I had, or treating things that I didn't really think I needed to be treating, until this point when I started to question it. And thank you for lighting that little spark. You like the tiniest spark. You're like, well, have you ever like thought about that? And I was like, down the rabbit hole, here I go.
I remember like us pointing that like you were put on birth control in part for other health issues. And I remember you writing back and being like, you're the only person who's ever asked me why I was put on that. And the rabbit hole you went down, I was like, keep going.
I know, it was insane. Like I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, I had bad cramps, but I mean, was I like debilitated? No. I mean, was it really that bad? No. I mean, everything was regular. Sure. So I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, why has nobody ever asked me, aside from like literally preventing birth, are you on this pill? And like, is that really like necessary? And it just really blew my mind, and it still does today. And I wish I could like wear a sign around my neck and ask people, but you have to be, everyone's on their own journey. You kind of have to be cautious, because once you figure this stuff out, you are like lit up to tell other people, but you have to be cautious because you don't want them to think, you okay?
I know. Well, that was one of the things I loved when you're like, I'm angry now. And I'm like, yes, like everything that you were starting to feel, I was like, yes, this is going to be permanent for her because she's getting it. Like everything's locking into place.
Yeah, definitely. Little things add up to a big picture. Like little strokes on a painting add up to a huge picture. And I was just starting to zoom out of mine instead of being focused on one tiny piece of like, well, I eat this and I don't lose weight.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're taught, right? Our society is such a reductionist culture, and we don't look at our habits. We look at, because we even say on tracks or off track, right? So it's like we're looking at the thing we just did. And what most people do is give us more food rules, which just escalates the battle and doesn't help us get to the root of things versus looking at the system that we exist in and including our physiology. Because I know when you went off birth control, you started feeling things more, like your body started to regulate on its own and you did the things to help you detox. Like you really, it was an important, I would say, profound transition in your health journey.
Yeah. And if you talk to me like any other time, I would have found a way to work that into my schedule or, think about it a little bit more and then maybe kind of execute on it later. But at that moment, you were right. I was so angry that I just said, I'm done. I'm done. I looked at that little packet of pills and I said, goodbye. I'm done with you. And I was winging it. And I did experience some things like my blood sugar really was all out of whack. And I think that's what really freaked me out the most about reading about that was that unnaturally, without even trying or without even consuming a ton of sugar, that some birth control hormones, synthetic hormones, can really impact the way your body produces a reaction to sugar or how much sugar it thinks you need. And after stopping the birth control pill, I was immediately like eating the way I was eating before and getting the shakes within an hour or two. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I had to reevaluate everything as my body detoxed from this. And I'm really proud of myself for not stopping and going back. Cause like at some points I was like, I told you I was watching a TV commercial and it made me cry.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this is it. Like I'm definitely not the same as I was the past 10 years on this medicine. And people don't think of it like that as being so serious. But I mean, every little thing you start to feel and understand everything about your body in a different way. It's incredible.
Well, yeah. And I want to talk about that because we will also get to how, you've lost 20 pounds as a side effect, even though you didn't believe that either, which I totally get. But how did you dig deep to hang on during this process? Because you do get these hits of freedom, but then it's like, okay, then I'm going down to the roller coaster again. Like I got to hold on again. Like what helped you? Because a lot of people I'm sure are in the middle. We're all on a journey, right? Even though I say it's not a journey, it's more like a solar system where like one day you're like feeling great. The next day you're like, what the fuck? The next day you're like, oh, I don't know. But what really helped you? I would love to hear what worked.
Yeah. So I just kept thinking you have good days, you have days that are kind of questionable. And, I always find other people's journeys to be inspiring, but usually those journeys aren't like, well, I stopped taking birth control on a whim in October and now I'm feeling all sorts of crazy. It's more like I continue to push at the gym until I could run that 5K or that half marathon. So I found I wasn't relating to other people's stories as much, and I had to really dig deep into my own story. So I had to anytime I felt something great, I was really just becoming very introspective. I was like, what was that made you so happy? What worked? What didn't work? How are you feeling today? And not focusing on the little minutia of things in terms of well, I ate this and I didn't feel great, or I did this, I did that. It was more like, I listened to that song. It really made me happy. Or I saw a really great bird today and that was awesome. And it's not so that was the only thing great that happened, but I was also busy. I think that was kind of a good time to do it because I was busy with other things like work and life. And it didn't give me enough time to focus on the fact that I may have no idea what's going on inside of my body at the moment. But I didn't push too hard. I didn't say, well, I've changed one thing, I'm going to change everything. And usually I'm an all or nothing person, which is what we've discovered. And, I still am with some things. I mean, you can't completely change your makeup of who you are, but it's become a little bit more obvious when I'm doing it. So I can be cautious or I can be all or nothing when I need to.
I love that you said you took it step by step. And I think with our health, it really is hard. We're again told to do all or nothing, but so let's talk about that because we did work on being all or nothing with exercise and food and what, we've talked on this podcast about the comfort styles of are you an avoider, accommodator, competitor? What did you learn about your all or nothing eating that was under that it was, because you're not really an all or nothing eater, or dieter. So what did you discover was really the issue there that you had to unravel?
I'm the biggest accommodator. I accommodate everything I can. I really have found that out. And I didn't think I was because in my mind, I'm independent, I'm strong, I kick ass, but then I'm realizing I kick ass around everything. Whether I've got to adjust my time because my old person who used to do my nails was inconvenienced by the time. That really set it home for me when you asked, why do you go get your nails done at that time? Well, that's the time that my nail technician likes me to come. I realized, oh my gosh, I'm doing something for me and I'm accommodating That too. Like I was really, that really set it home for me. And I found that like accommodating people is one thing, like when you go to someone's house for a holiday, eating and things of that nature. And I'm still working on that. I'm sure all of us who struggle like that in defining what you're trying to do for your health and your body and your life will struggle with other people interfering. But now it's just become so easy for me internally. Like I said, like you said, the side effect of weight loss, I really didn't believe it, but I'm working, I'm doing things to do this, to have this weight come off, but I'm not totally consumed by it. And almost as if my thought process has changed around it, other people no longer seem to bug you about it when you have such a natural air about it. And it's like the weirdest feeling to come full circle and realize I'm no longer accommodating someone to eat something that they want me to eat, or I'm honest in what I want and what I need from others. And so they know what to expect from me and I know what to expect from them. So it's like flipping all these cards and like kind of turning the picture to make it the most ideal for everyone. It's like accommodation at its heart. But like I've done all that and I'm no longer like, I haven't lost people because of it. I haven't changed who I am at the core because of it. You know, it's like, it's been a natural thing that took time, you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I know from working with you, some of your relationships got stronger. And like, not only did you not lose people, but some of them got better and stronger when you were clear on what you needed.
Yeah, I didn't realize that being an accommodator, that while it was like helping so many people in my mind, it was also enabling them to not help themselves. And I think that the biggest accommodation I made was learning to not accommodate myself. and then like other things come of it. You know, it's made me stronger at work too. I definitely feel that I've transformed at work, which I always joke with you as like my $700 cake. Like I'm not going to mess with that. But like over time, it just like naturally started happening. Like I didn't have to test these theories as much at work as I did in my personal and family life. So, but it just rolls into it in a nice way. So it's been really cool to feel that and have it be like second nature. Thinking back at it, like when I realize I'm doing this or like I'm accommodating someone, I'm like, wait, what am I doing? What is going on? I can't be falling into this trap again. I've got to stay strong.
And just for people listening, in Truce with Food and when I work with people privately, we have you work on a story that it would be like, I give you the metaphor of like a $7 cake, a $70 cake, and a $700 cake. And $70, we experiment with new ways of being that are like at a $70 level, because once you master the skills and the tools and you become more resilient, and you can then, that $700 cake feels like a $70 cake. And so you just kind of start taking on bigger and bigger risks and challenges. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just, last week my Forbes article went live and I did this article about the connection between when we take a leadership role in our health and how it translates into our career. And you're one person I think about how your leadership style has changed as a result of and gotten stronger because you're not accommodating and you're working in that collaboration space more and more, which I think is exciting, because then work becomes more fulfilling and it's this upward spiral. So then you don't have to reward yourself at night with food and, just
or even give yourself energy, to continue what you're doing with food. I'm sure I've had those moments where I remember that back in college, this is really when it was, well, I have to study for a test. Well, let me get a snack.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was like a thing, I became really like snack hungry then. And I was stressed out, of course, like when you're stressed out, but, eating when you don't want to feel other things is really like, it's a double-edged sword. It's just so strange until you really think of it that way. Cause someone could tell me, in fact, I think my fiance has told me this a few times and I wanted to smack him really. He was like, are you really hungry or are you just bored? But he totally didn't realize what he was saying. And that, I think but that was, to me, I said, well, how dare you say, are you really bored? Are you just bored? Because like, what makes you think that my life is so simple that I'm just bored? And then, that was something that ignited me to find you or like, look for like, am I hungry or am I just bored?
Well, it's funny. If we come to that conclusion, it's okay. But if someone else tells us, it's like, what? You know what I mean? Like Carlos is like, well, you do eat as much as me. I'm like, oh. And then I'm like, I'm over it now, but like it used to, like when we were first dating and everything, I was like, oh, he thinks I'm fat. You know what I'm like? And now I'm just like,
are you paying attention to that?
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm just like, well, it used to be like I would complain to him about my weight and stuff, and he would be like, I don't know how to win here. Like, what do you want me to say? And I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah, exactly. And mine
because
was
I
usually
didn't know.
what do you want a snack? Or I think we should get a snack. And he's like, we just ate dinner. How could you be hungry? Are you just bored? And I was like, oh, really? Like, it's just, it was a hard thing to hear, but when you hear it, it wasn't insulting. It was like literally he just didn't want a snack. But
Yeah.
now I'm like, I use that line every now and again because I can.
Yeah. You realize too that a lot of the nighttime stuff was like just kind of reviewing the day, right? And like wondering
Mhm.
like, did that go okay? Did that not? And when we're accommodating, we kind of, because we're not really clear on what the other person needs and what we need, it's like it just drains us. And I think back to your studying example, I think often people eat for work because they need the energy to get through the discomfort of it because they're so drained from these other patterns. Again, it's this whole system that I keep using the metaphor, but we're plants. Like, what is the soil that we're in that will make healthy habits bloom rather than, thinking that our habits in of themselves are about the food or whatnot. So let's switch gears to food. Like, what surprised you about what works for you, and how did you, what was key for you for figuring that out?
I think the experimentation was key to figuring out what worked for me with food. However, I think it changes. It really does. It changes seasonally. It changes all the time. Like I remember I was telling you recently that, the type of food I'm eating, like what I'm eating, and we realized like it's actually seasonal.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I really want, I'm trying to think of something winter. Like I really want Brussels sprouts. Like that's a winter vegetable. Like, I mean, technically my body really doesn't want it right now. If I wanted it, I'd have it, but I'm realizing that what I want is actually tied more to the seasons and more to what naturally is growing and occurring. But before all that, I mean, just like I had no idea that would even become a thing because I was so stressed when I first started talking to you. Like, why is it such a battle to figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner and how it's going to make me feel? And is it enough this? And is it enough fat? And is it enough something else? I can tell you now that my body used to take 2 weeks to bounce back or to even show me that something was wrong. So I would joke, I'm sure many people have had this experience where you can eat bad for a week or two, on vacation or whatever. And then you don't feel it until it's all over and you're like, oh, wow, that was a lot. That was a long couple weeks or whatever it is. I can tell within hours now if I haven't had enough fat or if I haven't had enough protein, or if I've had too much sugar, I can just tell my body knows and it gives me the signals that I need to get back to a place that feels good for it. So that's what really shocked me is that I didn't think that it would be so instantaneous eventually. And that, I can have pizza and, still live my life. And I was joking before this that I do have Tate's cookies sitting next to me and that I do enjoy them still. But, I know that I can bounce back depending on what it is, so that my body's really resilient now. And it wasn't before. So that was something really cool. And fat is so good for you.
I know. I was just in Truce with Food last week. Like everyone was like, oh my God, this is the only time someone has encouraged me to eat fat. And they're like, it's a miracle worker. I'm like, right. I'm like, everybody eat more fat. Like if you take anything away from this.
Fat for breakfast. I really I struggle with that a little, but then I realize what I can do to get more fat in. And it's it's a game changer. And I also figured some people have to eat more times per day. But I found that if I have to eat more than 3 times per day, then something's not right. And I feel like I'm so happy about that because I'm busy and I don't want to stop doing all the fun or cool or crazy things I'm doing to eat. Eating is great. I don't know if I'm a foodie, but I'm friends with foodies. So I enjoy spending that time, eating with others and having that time to catch up and things of that nature. So that's not gone for me, but it's no longer a source of anxiety or questioning around, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? How, what, all those questions are gone. I can find something anywhere to eat, even when I'm held up in conference rooms at work. So I think that that's really important to me too, as long as I get enough fat.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And what you're describing is the paradox is as your body becomes more resilient and you can tell immediately if you're off, you don't want to do it as much because you're feeling so much better. Again, most people are like, oh no, but I'll always just want this stuff. And I'm like, no, over time, you start feeling so great that you realize eating out of alignment kind of brings you down and it slows you down in a way as well. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And
yeah.
and when the idea of portions popped up to me when you were talking about the tates. Because to me, it's like not about the tates. It's like, am I then feeling bad about it and eating the whole bag? And so how has understanding blood sugar, gut health, and again, removing these patterns that were draining you and stressing you have, like, we've never talked about portions. We've never done like cubes or hands or whatever. How do you feel about portions now?
Yeah, so that is so important to me because I feel like portions, everyone wants to make you feel like you got to wherever you are in life because you overindulged, you overate, and you didn't think about portions. Or that you didn't care enough to think that you weren't eating healthy. Well, that's not true because I was like living and dying by a food scale, by measuring cups, by points, by macros. I was so obsessed with it that I was like an accountant, but with food. And it was like, I am not an accountant of food. I don't even think about it. I mean, I know what's reasonable if there's not enough food. And I also don't feel bad about leaving food on my plate anymore. And I've realized that recently I've become like something I would normally eat and be completely like, okay, I ate this, I'm satisfied, I'm full. I'm actually fuller sooner. So like, that's really cool. I'm like, oh, good. But I've never thought about it in counting or like half of your plate should be this and 3/4 of your plate should be that. I'm winging it. And I guess some people call that intuitive eating, but I just eat what I know is going to make me feel good. And if that's like 2 peppers and a cup of broccoli and 8 ounces of meat, I have no idea because I don't measure it anymore in that sense. I just know how much to eat. And I never thought, I'm like, if I was me a year ago listening to me right now, I would cringe and be like, shut up, you're lying.
Yeah, we have healthy skeptics. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I'm still skeptical because I'm thinking, do I measure? I don't know. Like, I know when there's not enough food, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up thinking about, because I feel like that's one of the big like nutrition myths. Like some people tell you should snack all day. Other people, no. And the truth is like you want to work up to 3 meals a day so that your body gets a break and your blood sugar is resilient. Now, some people need to have snacks while their body's healing, but we don't need to be like, I think it's so freeing to know that you don't have to snack all day.
Yeah, I don't have 800 Tupperware containers in my bag, like ready to go for the moment that I need cheese or nuts. I do snack every now and again, especially if I'm super active or if there's like a busy day. And that's just, I feel like, oh my God, I could eat a snack. I could use something for now between this meal and that meal and I'll do it. But it doesn't feel like if I leave the house without, 18 almonds, I'm going to die.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up another thing I'd love to ask you before we get to the whole weight loss thing we wanted to break down before we started talking. But you use the word wing it a lot now. And I love that because when we first, again, started working together, you were more of a planner and more like had things scheduled. And this pattern you're describing about being an intuitive eater, syncing up with the seasons, you're also doing that with your life now in terms of like self-trust with exercise and like discovering what really makes you happy now that, because before we got on, you said you have like so much more space in your brain. So can you talk a little bit about the ripple effect of when you start to trust yourself and you really unravel your story, how you can be so much more intuitive with life, I guess, and be able to wing it, and how freeing is that?
Yeah. So like that word intuitive, like I feel like I'm intuitive in different ways. Like I think that maybe there's a hummingbird on my plant behind me and I turn around and it's there. Like that could just be magic. I could maybe have really great hearing, but those two things are not true.
Do hummingbirds even make noise?
Barely. Like they make very little noise. Like they do like make noise occasionally, but not enough that you would hear them and like turn around and look. So, like that to me is part intuition. But, having that amount of free space in my brain has become so freeing to me because I always felt like I had so much going on. Like someone described my brain as like balls bouncing around, like that I've got so many different balls like moving in my head that like, how do I even think? And I still am like a multitasker and blah, blah, blah. And if anything, I've gotten better at it because I've so much less weighing me down in my mind about eating and food and perception around food. It's incredible. And so I found like that my creative process is better. And for those who maybe on like listening think, oh, creative process, like, oh, what kind of creative process? Like, I don't know, what's yours? Like, cause mine is so different. And I was joking with Allie that I can't go and tell people, go look at flowers when you're out on a run because that'll change your life. But like, honestly, that's what works for me. And I found that these different, maybe non-traditional ways of looking at everything have given me so much more intuition about my body, about how I feel. And it's important for me to embrace them, even if they're not really by the book or like what society wants you to think is the thing. And I really didn't believe you. When someone asked me over a year a year and change ago, what would you do if you could do anything, like relating to my job, but what would you do if you could do anything? Imagine like the grass is greener. What is it? And I said something that was like just a tick above like what I currently had. And I was like, and they were like, no, really. Like if there were no limits, I really couldn't even think that far beyond. And like now, if you ask me, I could talk for hours about anything, not just my job, but like my garden, my refrigerator, who knows? Like it could be a lot. So it's freed up so much for me. It's been so cool to see the difference in my brain from a year ago to now.
I love that because part of this is like just, and when we talk about being creative, I mean thinking creatively too, like with ideas and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I love it. It's so unique to each person. And that's part of the fun. I mean, it's not fun when you're in it. I mean, it's not always bad or always good, but it's challenging to like, I kind of joke like turn the bus around because I always say normal is not working so well, right? And so even you and I are both like not normal people, but you start to, when you do this self-discovery process, realize like, oh, I've been buying into a lot of shit. Like not just like taking birth control and going on steroids, which again, you probably needed, but they probably didn't need to give you, I mean, they know that they fucked up, right? I mean,
yeah, they definitely did.
But like that, like for my version, it was like Accutane. Like, why the hell did I do that? Like, but it starts with health. But because we're really changing your entire mindset, not just a couple of beliefs, you can't look at like if you think you're not normal before this, like forget it. Like after.
Yeah, no, you start to look at things so differently. Like I remember seeing something like on the group where someone's saying, oh, I'm looking for like natural cleaners. And, and at that point I was unpacking so much stuff. I felt like a hoarder or some, like in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, how could she even think about natural cleaners? Like that's great in an ideal world. But now I find myself like looking into like my water quality and, things like that. Like, or just like, is the airflow optimal for like the way I'm feeling? I mean, dumb stuff in your mind that you like now think relates and could totally relate. But I mean, the little things that you now can think about because you figured out so many other important parts of basic living, like what are you eating and how does that make you feel? And just no longer have to worry about all of that on such a granular basis. It's like life-changing in the weirdest way because I'm now paying attention to so much stuff, but I have the time and energy to do it.
Well, Dr. Naomi Wolf said like dieting is the most powerful political sedative because like basically like dieting and being thin isn't about attractiveness. It's about like consuming your life and orienting the meaning of your life towards weight loss. So it's like, rather than saying like, hey, what do I want to think about? It's like, well, I feel like I've checked the box if I've gotten to the gym, if I've packed, if I've cooked all day, right? Like all of our meaning is being funneled into this like crappy, like not the whole truth equation, I guess. So
when I lose X pounds, I'll be, insert anything here. And like planning a wedding and figuring all this out is like the most frustrating thing because people automatically assume that you're doing everything because of something and not like you're not just living your life and, happen to lose weight as a side effect because you put in a lot of really hard emotional work and not just because you're getting married, and if you're doing it just because you're getting married, like, hey, that's fine. That's your truth. Live it. Like, I'm not mad about it. But my truth is like, I'm just doing this so I can live even better, as far as you go on. And I had a friend tell me that it takes, talking about playing guitar. Oh, you want to play guitar? Like, it's going to take a whole year of like really hard practice. And like each set of that time is going to be really different for different reasons. And I feel like, getting to this point took me a little bit over a year. And it doesn't feel like it took a year. It feels like it was like zoomed fast forward, like really fast. And then I just like magically ended up here. But, you can retrospectively look back and go, okay, I did a lot of hard work to get to this point.
That's why I always tell people, especially in Truce with Food, like pay attention to what's no longer there because we're removing resistance and simplifying. Like you're removing like what weighs you down, quote unquote. And you're like, whoa. Well, and let's talk about that because I want to like, I don't know if we can clarify the weight loss thing because I do say sometimes it can be as a side effect. Some people, they are so exhausted when they come to me, they don't care. But some people are still holding on to that. And I know it's super controversial. Like, people are like anti-diet culture. And I'm like, well, what are we for? Right? Because you have to have a vision of what you're for, really, because if you're just anti something, you can't like, I don't know. It doesn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are anti things right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what are you for? Like, what is it that you're for? I mean, I'm for flowers, okay? Like, that's one thing I'm for. But, if you don't have anything that you're for, well, you're against everything. It's kind of questionable. But yeah, diet culture is like a really crazy thing in society. And I feel like, well, I haven't tried every diet. I actually, you'll find this interesting. I was in the dressing room the other day trying on a dress, and I was with my future mother-in-law, and a woman was so excited because she had just lost weight and she had now fit into a smaller size pants. Okay. And I'm in the plus size department still of Nordstrom. Okay. So I'm not like, in the whatever the normal section is. I don't care. It was where I found my dress. And this woman, I was like, oh, congrats. That's great. Like, you look wonderful. Like, being nice, because she was announcing it to everyone in the dressing room. And she comes to my room before I'm about to shut the door, and she goes, when you're ready to lose weight, I have a program for you. So I'm so okay with like everything now. Like, a year ago, that would have killed me. I would have been like, I would have cried on the spot. I would have been like, get out of here. Who are you? Who sent you? Yeah. But today I was like, oh, thanks so much. I appreciate that. I was like, I'm just living life, living the dream. And she goes, well, I'm on Medifast, and let me tell you, it's changed my life. And I was like, oh, I'm really happy that worked for you. I was like, but I really like to eat real food. And part of me then said, okay, now stop now, because you can't convince everybody. I was like, but I think that's awesome that it's working for you. And thanks again. And then she told me not to get pedicures. So I feel like she was her own bundle of ideas. So yeah. Yes.
That I remember this was a couple years ago when I was living in New York, and I went up to visit my sister. She happened to be in New York, and I was doing jump roping where she was staying. I mean, this is so random, but this woman came in and she said to me, she's like, if you do like intervals, it really helps you with weight loss. And I had the same exact kind of reaction that you did. I was like, oh, that's so cute. She thinks I'm trying to lose weight. And I was like, the old me would have been like, oh, I'm fat. Clearly she thinks I'm fat. And instead I'm like, she's clearly probably interested in weight loss. And so she's like, it was so much more about her. And I did the work to be resilient and not to trust my own path. Because I think too, when you're on a path that's working, because you are, it's easier also to kind of say, oh, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. So let's talk about that, because you have lost, you told me before the episode, 20 pounds, almost 21. And the weight we don't focus on weight loss in our work together. And it didn't happen right away. So how did you, what is your idea now? If we're clarifying the issue, going in, it's clearly not about counting points and portions and all that stuff. What is we were like, we need to talk about this so we can really flush it out, because it's not that you weren't okay, you still wanted to lose weight, but it didn't become the driving goal. So I'm curious, what you would say, if you, what are you doing so that you are losing weight, but it's a side effect? And how did you put aside needing to lose weight right away because you didn't know you were going to get to this point? I'm very clear, this is not a weight loss program. So 2-part question.
Yeah, definitely. So when we first started working together, I was like, yes, I do want to lose weight. And I didn't expect you to be like, here's what you're going to eat. Here's how much of it you're going to eat. And this is what's going to happen, miracle. Because that wasn't what I was expecting. Because obviously I read your website and I wasn't I wasn't expecting that. I really wanted to get to a root cause. And I found that as we started talking, so I first did with you, I did that quick session. Well, it wasn't that quick, but we did a session because I was like, well, let me just make sure this is what that we could work together, that I hate your ideas or anything like that.
And then we got along because my work is awesome, but you have to get along with, if you're listening there, anyone you work with, you have to feel comfortable enough with them. So there should always be some sort of screening protocol. So Nicole and I did the Truce serum session. That's what she's talking about. But I just want to put that out there for people listening. Half the battle is feeling comfortable that you can trust the other person.
Exactly. So, figuring that out, and you were very honest that listen, this may become a side effect. It may not. Your body genuinely wants to balance itself out. It wants to find its happy medium wherever it is in balance. And, if you're on a lot of medication or if you have a lot of health concerns, your balance may be different than somebody else's. And so your body needs to figure that out. And, that's you're going to figure out once you start unpacking all these emotions and understanding your story. And so I was aware at the beginning, at the outset, that I wasn't going to necessarily get the answers and then all of a sudden lose weight. But in my mind, I was like, I will, because I will, because I'm an overachiever. I just figured that would be instantaneous, instant gratification, because I must have figured out something to have found you. So therefore this will happen a lot faster. Well, I don't think that I realized at the time that I wasn't losing weight. It wasn't a priority. Once we really started working together, it was okay, whatever. This is so much more important than me finding movement on a scale. And I realized that I'm figuring out so many things about myself that are going to help me, live a better life, mentally, physically, everything, just holistic, from tip to toe or whatever they say, one of those things. But I feel like that was really important for me to realize that weight loss actually wasn't my priority, even though on the outset I thought it was. And so I went a long time. I mean, I don't think I actually started losing weight until about 8 or 9 months in working. Now, also, I should say I threw in that wrench of stopping the birth control pill after 10 years. So, my body probably would have figured something out, and started evening out at that point. But losing weight really is a side effect. And it's become something I realized that was happening. And even up to the point that we hit our less than 1 year mark, when I figured I'd be eating this perfect way and I would be so quote unquote good girl mentality about it all. I wasn't. I was still sometimes feeling like the bad girl, but I was smart enough to know that it wasn't good or bad. I wouldn't label it like that, but I was definitely not in my mind in alignment with what the principles of what I knew I needed were. And so that was kind of shocking to me too. And when I thought I just, things have a funny way of uncovering themselves when you have put in the hard work, and things just started to click. And, I was no longer, I always say I was afraid that the other shoe was going to drop, what was next. And, part of what we discovered when working together was that I was always afraid of disappointing someone or having something happen, giving you that gut sinking feeling. And you know what? Now bad things happen and my gut doesn't sink. I just deal and I move on. And so I feel like the weight loss was kind of like that. I'm like, oh, I think I lost some weight. I'm like, God, do I get on the scale and check, or should I just not? Because then I'll get weird about it. And I felt like I was at such a good place with everything that I was like, well, hell, let me get on the scale and figure it out. Let me see if I did lose weight. And I did. And then, I check every couple of weeks just to see, make sure first off, I'm not somehow dropping too much weight, because that could be bad too. Keeping track of your health in that sense, making sure it's actually because of things you're doing, not something you need to look into. And that's where I landed. And I happened to lose 20 pounds. And I joked before we started, I didn't really feel like I worked that hard for it. And so I felt bad about it. But then I was like, no, I worked really hard last year and up to this point with my, thought process and everything to get to this point. And I feel like that's so cool, because it's not something I don't usually think of things as a delayed side effect like that. Yeah. It's kind of nice. But I mean, even now, I know what I need to eat to feel good and to be my best every day. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not eating, some days I eat more, some days I eat less. And that's really dependent on how my body feels. And I use those cues. My body is okay, do I feel a headache coming on? Which I rarely get headaches. I used to suffer from really bad migraines. So every 2 weeks I would get a really bad migraine, always on the weekend. Because what happened all week, you start off strong and you start to fade, and then all of a sudden your body's pissed off on the weekend. So I feel like these things were really all indicative of a longer journey that I put in the time. And it really is a side effect. I don't know if that's answering the two-parter though. I'm sorry.
No, it totally is. Because, the next week's episode, which is Why Am I Eating This Now? I had 2 clients come on to share their experience of why they were eating this now. And one of them was saying how she gave someone else my name and kind of told her some of the stuff that they did in the program. And the woman was like, oh my God, that sounds like too much work. And my response was you either put the work in up front, or it's a lot of work for food to consume your life too. And I think we've normalized that. And so when it's all of a sudden not there, or not there as much, and it decreases gradually, I just don't know if there's any way of getting around doing the kind of emotional work if you really want to have the kind of freedom and results. You talked about, your migraines are gone. You have better focus. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. I definitely had focus issues where, I couldn't quiet my brain. I couldn't turn my brain to a relaxation stage. Some people, even just talking to my friends, they're like, do you ever stop? Does your mind just always go 1,000 miles an hour? Yes, I think it does. But I'm able to turn that off sometimes now. And I find that it is related to food. So when people say, oh, I have that 2:00 feeling or that 2:30 feeling, no, I haven't given up coffee. In fact, I drink coffee every morning. I just make sure I drink it at the right time, because that's important to me. The way my body, absorbs the coffee and and it's very pure coffee. It's pure coffee, but I feel like I am that person who's had 10 cups of coffee no matter what time. And sometimes that can be jarring to others, but my focus isn't always laser. I can focus a lot, or I can focus on a lot. So that has been something I've struggled with, and I've accommodated others, my whole life, trying to tamper that down. And I find that the way that I can do that is if I'm eating correctly and at the right times, what my body needs. Because if not, I find that if I have too much sugar, not enough sugar, definitely not enough fat, that like that can all go awry. And I find that especially at lunchtime, we talked about this and I was like, I could not possibly make lunchtime my biggest meal of the day. That is so insane to me. Now it is like, it's my biggest meal of the day. And it really helps me because like getting to lunchtime is easy. It's the part to me getting from lunchtime to bed that used to be hard. And that's where I find now that like, it's not even an afterthought at this point. Like the afternoon is not a problem because of the way I can focus because I'm eating correctly. And now, I mean, yeah, I still, as you can all probably tell from this recording, that I am like, my mind goes everywhere, squirrel, whatever. I'm not even looking out a window on purpose so that I can truly focus on this.
Well, that answer, I think, helps us even clarify the weight loss because it's so hard to explain because in essence, what we're doing is changing the meaning of things. And so like, you can still care about weight loss, but it's not the thing anymore. And what you're describing is all of a sudden, if you can tie food into these more immediate benefits, like being able to focus, who doesn't love not having migraines, right? Like,
Yeah.
and having more energy and like, and feeling things more and work getting better because you're more intuitive and like life being easier, the pressure for like this end goal of weight loss starts to subside because you're like, I'm getting something out of this process as I go. And so I feel like I needed better.
Well, I just felt bad about it when I'd started losing weight. And I remember when I was like, hey, I still really do care about weight loss. I was like, but I feel bad because everything we've uncovered about, my body and my life and just like my thought process and everything, I just like so important. And this doesn't seem so important in the scheme of things, but I felt bad about it. But it's almost like you have really, really foggy glasses and you have no idea that they're foggy until it starts to clear up. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. So the way I saw everything before was like really hazy. It was totally not clear at all. And even I don't have full clarity into everything, but now I feel like, wow, I was walking around like with my eyes like partially closed for like 22 hours a day. And so now I feel like I can see things so much clearer. It almost is just like jarring because you realize that other people don't see that the same way. And so that's when you get those people like that woman in the dressing room. And she's like, hey, I've got a program for you. And I'm like, oh God, okay. Like, good for you. I'm really glad you got something. But, it doesn't throw off your whole day or your whole meaning of what you're doing because like it's so much bigger than just the scale, even though like I am just as excited as anybody else to have lost 20 pounds. So I was like, I'll take it, but it's not obsessive in my mind anymore. Like, well, when I hit 22 pounds, what's going to happen? It's like, it'll happen when it happens, if it happens.
Well, and that reminds me too, what you were talking about, because I hear this from a lot of people, like being worried about the other shoe dropping. And I remember us working together and I remember your dog got really sick and you were like away for work. And you like, when we were talking about like, I'm afraid the other shoe's dropping, I'm like, it has dropped. Like things were going okay. And then because you've become more resilient and like by going into the past rather than ignoring it. I mean, we revisit the past for like a lesson, but like, because you became more resilient in the present and like really started doing the uncomfortable things like not accommodating and stuff, you develop this resilience. And so it's like the woman in the dressing room, the scale, whether you go up or down, like those micro things you were talking about that used to bother you, they just bounce off of you because you're like, first of all, I trust myself that like, I'll figure this out because I've figured this far. What I figured out in the last year was nothing short of a miracle when you really start to look at the matrix called our healthcare system and diet culture on top of that. It's like, to me, it's amazing. I think everyone's doing amazing considering how abnormal is. Like,
oh yeah, it's like, it's the scariest thing to like look at not only the healthcare system, but our overall system in general. And just like the huge disparity, the dichotomy of everything. It's so illuminating. But like what you said about my dog getting sick, like that was such a huge moment for me because I said like, I'm freaking out. Like this is the other shoe, it's dropping. And like you said, it's already dropped and like, you're still here, you're still okay, everything's good. And I was like, oh, you're right. And what, to this day, like my dog is still struggling with health issues. And that to me would be like the biggest like thing, because my dogs are like so important to me, that would end everything else. Like, oh, well, the dog is sick, so like I can eat whatever I want. I don't have to move and exercise. I can give up on all these other things in my life because that's going to consume me. But because I have so much more free space in my brain that's not being consumed by like what I'm eating and how I'm feeling, I'm able to take care of my dog better. I'm able to do all these things because I'm not so rocked by this trauma, whereas like any trauma before, like someone canceling last minute plans, like I don't see that as huge trauma, but like, it can make you really question a lot of things. And like, just the little things that, happen to you, you react so much better to them now. And it's hard to like react that way, especially when it comes to food. Like, oh, I've had such a busy day. I'm so tired. So I'm just going to eat insert X, whatever it is. And I had a week like that last week where I came home and I was like, well, I'm just so tired. I'm going to eat whatever. So the next morning I was like, well, that was stupid. It was like, hey, lesson learned. Like, I will, be a little smarter next time when I come home at whatever time and I'm just want to eat whatever. So, it happens, and it's not like I've figured it out completely. I still am conscious of my questionable decision.
But if you're playing, but what that just described to me is when you're playing the long game, you do not worry about one night or even one day or what, because you're like, I'm in this to win it for the long run. And so all I'm doing is learning more about my patterns if you have the right skills or tools. And I think too, what's also important for people to realize is how important resilience is, not just in that moment, but when like what you were describing with your dog is you're no longer thinking you had to accommodate the dog only, right? You're like, where's the win-win? Like, how do I take care of him and take care of myself and keep my life functioning? Because, to take care of the dog, you got to keep your job, all these things.
Yeah. And I felt like a monster for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, every time I happen to have to go away for work for like a day or two, like something bad happens, but like, it's not like that. It just so happened to be in that moment that I felt like, well, that's it. I'm just going to have to tell everyone at work that I'm no longer traveling for more than a day trip. That's not really ideal. And that's not really what I want to do anyway. Like, that was just me accommodating what I thought my life wanted to hear to take care of my dog and like everything else. And I was like, well, wait a second. And like you said that, you're like, listen, the dog was probably sick. Nothing that happened to my dog was a result of me not being there or because of poor care from anybody else. It's an autoimmune disease, and that's what happens. And so I think that's like the same way people say, well, like, had I not been overweight, XYZ wouldn't have happened. Or if I was thin, I would have XYZ. I'd have happiness, or, I would have found peace in my life or something, so it's like looking at it on such a large scale. Like, when I'm skinny, this will happen, down to like the final thing of like, well, if I was home with my dog on Thursday afternoon, she may not have felt as bad. No, it probably isn't correlated. Well, but that resiliency is really like down to that level. It really took me a while to figure that out.
Well, and I'm glad that you made that parallel, because it's true. When we're in our story, everything is about us and how we're wrong, right? Like, and and it sets up those accommodator, avoider, competitor problems. But when you start to realize, whoa, I live in an ecosystem and there's things beyond me that are influencing whether or not I'm losing weight or not, or whether or not my dog is sick or not, it just gives you so much more emotional agility. Dr. Susan David calls it emotional agility. I like that. But and resilience. I mean, and then also the skill set to figure out how to manage, because you do want to move forward in a productive way. So I'm so glad you brought that up. So awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. Before we head out, like, what's your wellness edge then? Because I always talk about it being a spiral staircase. We solve some questions, and then the answers give us new questions. It's a cycle. What are you working on now?
I'm just working on figuring out what makes me the happiest. I mean, because I find that I'm really happy generally in my space and in my garden. And, how can I take the way that I interact with people and the way that I interact with flowers and plants and things like that, and kind of combine them, maybe in something non-traditional, maybe just finding that work-life integration that we always talk about, because I love my career, I love my garden. So, and they're not related currently. So yeah, that's my wellness edge. And to me, it's about feeling passion and being around other people that feel passion. It doesn't have to be mine. I just want to be around passionate people. And so I have been pushing others in my life, to find what they're passionate about. And even if it's totally unrelated to mine, I just like to know. I'm like, hey, what makes you passionate? What really gets you excited? And I don't know that everyone would see that as related to like wellness, but I do. I think it's so important to feel deeply and to go through this crazy world and make sure that others are also feeling something too. And, whether it's political, personal, environmental, anything. I want other people to find their passion and their spark that really makes them feel as happy as I do, when I find a great flower.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's a lot of research showing how important meaning is to our biometrics. And like people, they did one study, like people who are just focused on those hedonistic pleasures, which are good, but not sufficient, like just like buying stuff and eating and all that stuff. They actually, with a lack of meaning, showed the same amount of like stress as people who'd been under trauma. And so it's like meaning is so important to us, and it's a big part of wellness. So I'm glad you brought that out, because to me that sounds like your quote unquote weight loss plan, right? It's like if I keep being curious and like pushing my own edge, which right now is that, and your whole team is probably going to get flower arrangements. No, I'm just kidding, right?
Yeah, like when I buy the farm next week. No.
And I think it's so funny too, because you really do start to like simplify and feel like a hippie, because like you are a hardcore like businesswoman, right? Like you are a leader, like, and for you to be like my flowers, like I just love it, because you're starting to integrate like both sides, and we'll see how that influences your leadership and everything.
Yeah, when I'm squatting in the garden, picking weeds and like also trimming flowers in a blazer, my neighbors are like, what is she doing? Like work life integration.
Yeah. You're like, they call it earthing these days. Everything has to have a brand. Stepping on the earth is earthing now.
What would your bespoke brand be for like farming? I'm like, I have no idea. That's just not, I was like, that is just so like wild in my imagination right now that I'm just going to live my life, enjoy what I'm doing. And then if it becomes something more, it becomes something more. I can't believe how much I've let go of everything in the past year. Like it's no longer, I obsess over things in a good way, but I'm not so tied. I have more dreams every day of like what I want to do or what I could do or what's the possibility, that it's so freeing and it's fun. And even if none of those dreams ever like come up in my brain again, I just feel so lucky to have had that spark happen and then, move on to whatever's next. So it's been great.
Oh my God, I love that. So for people listening, like who are like struggling, or like the you of a year ago, what would you encourage them to ask, or what would you tell them, but as kind of a signing off here to clarify the issue? Like, can you say from your, this is a total leading question, will you tell them it's not about willpower?
Oh God, no, because I feel like I joke, ask anyone in my life. So I don't really quit jobs because I really love my career, but since I was a child, I think I've quit so many things. Like willpower is not like my middle name at all, because if I don't like something, I'm not going to keep doing it, because why waste your precious time or hard-earned money or anything, whatever, on something you don't like? And so if I don't like a book that I'm reading, I'm not going to finish it. If I don't like a food that I'm eating, I'm not going to finish it. I know that's really wasteful, but I don't really try things that I know that I won't want to eat. So I'm just very selective. So it's not about willpower at all. And what I would question people to think about is, when is the last time you felt really good? And what did that feel like? What did that look like? What did that feel like? And how can you imagine what was going on in your life at that point? You've asked me that question, and really it's not about willpower, because I don't think that that's necessary. I might have willpower to do certain things, but it's not related to this. And I just feel like you have to, if you're going to get in this car and take this ride, buckle up, because you're going to be, it's some weeks you're like, wow, this is like, oh, I've got this, I figured it out. Until like 2 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, I know nothing. But I would say, like, look at a time in your life where you had things figured out, and don't think about what you had or anything like that. Just think about you and like, what were you feeling? And then question if you want to feel that again. And if you do, you have to think deeper than worldly possessions, what you're eating, all those things. It's really important. And I feel that without questioning that and really taking an introspective look at yourself, and everything is related, everything is integrated in some way. And don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to not listen to what social media, the patriarchy, your doctor, don't listen to whatever they say, because like they're just a bunch, what is it that you say? They're just a bunch of traumatized children in suits. Like that's honestly it. We're all just kind of figuring it out. So like, don't listen to any one advice over someone else. Like, you might have the better answer inside. And so don't just take anything at face value. And I encourage anyone thinking about taking this journey, just do it. Think about what you want and where you felt the best. And if you don't know, then figure it out. I think you're worth figuring it out, and it's not about willpower, because God, like I said. God, I took kickboxing class. I didn't like that. I was done. I'm not afraid to walk away from something I don't like. And this is me. I'm not walking away from myself. So this is the place to invest it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your time. And thanks this is why I love my job. Like, this is what I get to talk about and work with on people, like their lives getting better and richer and more powerful. So thank you.
Well, thank you for not being like, here's my measuring cups and macros.
I don't have my own, so I'd be really bad. Like, I would not be walking my dog.
And for laughing with me in this past year and figuring it out as we go along. Because without you, I don't think I could have taken a lot of those steps to really test these things out in real life.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad that the message resonated. Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.